Hello, friends. This is Christopher Davis-Shannon, and today we're hopping across the United States to the West Coast to talk with and listen to a little bit of the music of the great Casey MacGill. Casey, how are you today?
I'm good, Chris, and thank you so much for those kind words, or that kind word.
You're only allowed one kind word on this show. That's the rule. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Would you mind just kicking us off with a tune?
Be my pleasure. This one is called Head in the Clouds. Head in the clouds. Hey, how's the weather up there? Got my head in the clouds. Honey, I'm walking on air. Nose to the grindstone, feet on the ground, a window without a view. But baby, when you kiss me, I found myself seeing skies of blue. Head in the clouds, and now my heart's on my sleeve. I'm falling in love, it's hard to believe. Oh, man, depression, he's gone with the wind. Got my head in the clouds, let the sun shine in. Got my head in the clouds, let the sun shine in.
That was a lovely tune, Casey. And for those of you that have never actually gotten the chance to hear Casey's recorded work, I'm going to link to a bunch of that below so that you can. It's so amazing to hear Casey just play with his uke or just with piano and sing, and he manages to captivate audiences like that. But what really draws me into his playing personally is the arrangement on his records. And more so even the vocal arranging. I think it's probably not a stretch to say that you were a little bit influenced by the Mills Brothers.
Oh, very much so. The Mills Brothers and the Boswell sisters and the Rhythm Boys, who and also to a smaller extent Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. But I think the Mills Brothers and the Rhythm Boys are the two main influences. And then later on, I became acquainted with Cats and the Fiddle.
Oh, yes.
And they're a lot of fun. And I'm a huge fan of Slim Gaillard, but that's more of a influence of attitude rather than actual musical arranging.
Certainly, yes. Slim and Slam is one of my favorite groups. I'm a huge Slam Stewart fan, and I don't think anyone will ever be able to take a solo like he did. The vocals and Arco together is just something so incredible.
It's a signature sound.
Yeah, and I know this pianist I play with out here got to see Slam play, I guess in probably the 70s or 80s. And at that point, to replicate the sound that he would get on the records live, he'd keep a 57 shoved up under the bridge of his bass. So he'd take a solo and lean over into the mic while he's doing it so that everyone could. So he'd have this big hunched over guy over top of an upright bass doing these crazy lines and singing at the same time. It's, talking about the Mills Brothers and Cats and the Fiddle and Slim and Slam as well. Some of my personal favorite groups as well. And just the entertainment value of those groups in a live setting is as unique as their music, I think, and the way that they approached both performance and even in the studio, because that joy comes through in the studio as well, which I think is one of the hardest things, is to get that entertainment translated to a disc. And I think you do that as well. And when you're arranging for a record and going to the studio to record these things, how do you go about trying to really capture that polished sound, but also keeping that nice vibe that you can get live? Well,
the arranging kind of comes out of the song itself, and I try to listen to the song to give me some sort of musical ideas, of what will showcase the song in a good way. And then when I'm singing with other
singers or musicians, I will figure out what our ranges are, and oftentimes I'm the one in the middle, and then I have a harmony above my voice and another harmony below my voice. That's a fairly common way of going about it. But sometimes the other two voices will be higher and mine will be on the bottom. But very seldom does my vocal, very seldom is my vocal on top, because I have a bass baritone or barrel tone. Mm-hmm. And, you know, generally there's at least one person that sings in a higher range than I do. So I have to arrange, you know, that's kind of a restriction I have to work with, you know, yeah. and like anything, you can use it to your advantage.
Certainly. I'm curious, do you work out the vocal arrangements on the fly in the studio, depending who's there, what their range is, or do you notate from the get-go? So you go into the session knowing at least the framework of the harmony that you're working with.
Well, for the vocals, definitely I'll write them out on paper, and the knowledge of the singers, you know, helps me, because then I'll know what everybody's ranges are and my own, and then it'll determine what key we do the song in, and all of that. If we're going to be recording a song that, you know, has a vocal harmony, then we will have been performing that tune on gigs before, and it'll all be memorized and just ready to go.
Yeah, so you practice a lot on the bandstand and less in the studio.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, a luxury that we don't have as much these days. I think not even pre-pandemic, when we're not gigging as much, but a lot of people don't work out those arrangements on the bandstand anymore, which used to be commonplace when you think about even you know, the Bop movement with Miles Davis's band and Coltrane's band, you know, gigging 7 days a week, and the things that you're able to work out when you're doing that, instead of treating the studio as a totally separate entity where you're trying to create the magic, and instead you get to relate it from stage to the studio.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because for many years, at least in the during the early 20th century up through, I don't know, up into the 70s, perhaps, you know, musicians would work, you know, anywhere up to 6 and 7 nights a week. You know, they might have one night off, but they'd work, you know, several nights a week. Plus, the gigs themselves were a lot longer. They wouldn't play just a 3-hour gig or a 2-hour gig. It would be several hours. You know, it was like music by the pound. You know, and you were hired to fill up the whole evening. You know, you weren't there. And then there were places like, you know, on 52nd Street in New York, there would be a group that would play like a half-hour set, and there'd be an intermission pianist, and the pianist would play a set, and so that would be a nice way of filling up the evening, because you would have these nice, concise sets, and then you'd have a piano player come on, and the talent that was happening at that time, it was just unbelievable. So you'd have Billie Holiday singing a set, and then Teddy Wilson or Art Tatum or some fantastic pianist would be the intermission pianist. It was incredible. And then, like, for example, if it was Lester Young or Ben Webster or Roy Eldridge or one of these great horn players whose band was playing, when it was their break time, they'd go next door to the next club or across the street, and they'd sit in with these other bands, and there was all this great cross-pollination on. That's why they called it Swing Street, because there was like at least a dozen clubs right within 2 blocks. And because of the way the sets were set up and everything, it was a wonderful, you know, just a cultural, an incredible cultural place, you know, for people to enjoy not only the music that was booked, but all of these spontaneous cross pollinations of whoever happened to be working there at that particular time.
Well, yeah, and New York, of course, is such a fine example of that. I mean, even the jazz scene there today is incredible. There's no doubt about that. That's one of the best in the world. But you just don't have that sort of
No,
of spontaneous community in the world anymore. And that's and another thing that gets me about just the, you know, for me, it's stories of the old days that I've picked up over the years from players. You know, just the vibe of the clubs, especially in New York as well, in the jazz scene, where it used to be a much more commonplace for people to just go out and hear jazz, and especially swing music, a lot of the repertoire that you do, because it was more accessible music to everyone. And you know, one of my personal favorite things I still do, well, obviously not at the moment, is get to play in the swing dance circuit. And I've always found that that's something that really informs your playing so much as a musician, because you're playing for an entire different purpose. I'm sure I'm guessing that's a scene you've probably played in quite a lot over the years.
Yes.
And do you find that you change your playing when you're doing that sort of gig to get to keep everyone on their feet?
Yes. And it's my whole approach just kind of automatically becomes more rhythmic. And so if I'm singing more rhythmically, when I'm playing the ukulele and I'm playing rhythm behind a soloist or something, I'm really trying to, you know, give the maximum amount of rhythm possible. And it's a very conscious thing, you know, because you're looking at the dancers out there and you want the dancers to get the rhythm you're trying to make. And this is not rock music where you are relying on a huge tsunami of volume coming out of, you know, monolithic speakers and all of that stuff. You're relying on the strength of the feeling that you're creating individually and then collectively as the group. It's that feeling you're trying to project to the dancers for them to pick up on and be inspired by, you know. And so yes, it really does make a difference when you're playing for dancers. And now if I'm playing in a club, you know, it's more of a listening situation, which is pretty rare for a club these days. I mean, if it's a club where it's being billed as a concert, that's one thing. But if you're just hired to play in a club, usually everybody's conversation about whatever's going on with them at the particular moment is way more important than anything you could ever be doing musically. You know, it's like, you know, I like to think of myself as a piece of toilet paper, you know, that's being used occasionally to clean up after these inane conversations. Yeah. And it's funny, I had a cassette tape of a gig I did in Beverly Hills back in the 80s. And I had this incredible band. It was an all-star group of this fiddle player named Bobby Bruce, who worked with Bob Wills and Leon McAuliffe, all the Western swing thing. And Bobby was like, and he also played on TV for all of the Oscars, and he was like a thoroughly trained musician. He swung his ass off. He was such a good player. And I had John Jorgensen, who's well known as a Django kind of guitarist, but also works with Elton John, and you know, he's an incredible musician. And I had two guitars, and I had a great string bass player, excellent singer. And you know, we were in this house, and I had my cassette recorder, and I had the cassette on, and it was capturing all this great music, but it was also capturing a conversation some people were having right off to the side of where we were, and they were talking about stock, you know, it's talking about investments.
Well, I hope you got some good tips that day, at least.
Yeah. well, anyway, it was a good example of how, how this music is, how music can be, wallpaper, like a sonic backdrop for people in their what I consider to be dull, uninteresting.
Right.
I mean,
jazz has become the background music of America, more
pardon
or
me
less.
for being a social critic, but if you're being constantly trampled on by the army with muddy feet all the time, you tend to take a darker attitude towards humanity.
Certainly. Well, it's good for me to hear that this was going on 30, 40 years ago as well. And it's not a new cultural shift that we're dealing with.
No, but it's been intensified, and there's a very dramatic downward spiral because of technology.
Yes.
And technology has dehumanized making music. And, at least with radio and records, people had some kind of a clue who they were listening to. Now, if you want to find out who's playing a particular thing, you're going to have to go on some sort of Byzantine electronic safari to try to find out what the hell you're listening to.
So. On the flip side, actually, with technology, which I'm still a big proponent of listening to vinyl records. It's one of I have a pretty decent collection, but it makes the music that you play, and I play a lot of it as well, is so much more accessible to a new, younger audience that otherwise would not have the availability of it. It was so hard to find, even when I was growing up, it was so hard to find those records except in 50-cent bins at CD stores that had the records tucked underneath all of the CDs. Like, you can have this trash if you want to give us $1 sort of thing. And now kids can just go on Spotify or YouTube, and there's great collections on YouTube of people spinning 78s and 45s of the old records, and it's such a goldmine for musicians trying to learn those old tunes, because there's not charts for half of that out there, and most of the charts are wrong anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Well, like you say, on the flip side, now we have these resources, for finding all this music. And I used to think I was Mr. Smarty Pants, because I had a big collection of records and I listened to all this stuff, and I'm thinking, oh, this is a really rare one, this is so great. And then I'd show up at a dance and there'd be these young kids, in their 20s, and they're playing this song that I thought was like so obscure. And I'm thinking, now wait a minute, but it's fantastic. And
I spent years tracking down that record.
And so it's really been a huge opportunity for people to learn about the cream of this music, the best of this music. And there's a thing, I think, on Facebook, and it's about rare jazz photographs. And I've been seeing all these incredible photographs.
One of my favorite groups. It's just incredible. And there's so many candidates from the clubs and things like that you didn't know. Actually, speaking of obscure jazz photography, but less obscure, have you ever seen Milt Hinton's book on his photography? So, one of my favorite bass players to start with, but his photographic eye and just the positions that he was in because of his studio sessions as live gigs. It's incredible to see so much of that from the back end perspective is so neat. That Facebook book is just a gold mine of old photographs. I love it.
It is.
Casey, would you mind playing us another tune?
No, that'd be fine. I'd like to do one now that was written for a podcast that existed in San Francisco a few years back, and the podcast was called Swing Nation, and this song is called Swing Nation, and it goes like this.
Hit that jive, close the door, get the carpet off the floor, Swing Nation. People groove together. Lindy Bow, Charleston too. Rhythm is our golden rule, Swing Nation. People grooving together. All around the planet, gates are in the groove. I don't have to have to move. Truck on down, paper stroll. Put some jelly on that roll, swing nation. People grooving together. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. All around the planet, gates are in the groove. I don't have to understand it. You just have to move. Truck on down, paper stroll. Put some jelly on that roll, swing nation. People groove together. Swing nation, people grooving together.
And that was one of Casey's original tunes, and he is a prolific songwriter, to say the least. You've been writing for over 40 years. Is that right?
That is true. I started, I think probably the first thing I attempted doing was when I was, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14. I did a parody of a folk song. I mean, I wrote a lyric to a folk tune, you know, like an alternate lyric, and then I was in a high school assembly when I was a freshman, and I did an instrumental song on guitar for an assembly. I think I played guitar for a few years, and I enjoyed it, but when I was I was almost 17. I went up to the Monterey, and I saw the Monterey Pop Festival, and I saw Jimi Hendrix up there, and I thought, you know, Jimi Hendrix has got this guitar thing taken care of. I think I'll go back to piano, and you know, so I actually I did. I stopped playing guitar, and you know, there was a number of guitar players around at that point, and there were hardly any keyboard players or piano players. So I went back to that and got into blues piano.
Mm-hmm. Blues piano. Who are your influences in blues piano? That's such a great and hopefully not lost genre. Like old school blues and barrelhouse piano playing is such a beautiful and special style of playing.
There's I think always going to be a few people who specialize in that. And when I first started, I was listening to the people out of Chicago, and my favorite guy out of Chicago was Otis Spann. Fantastic. He played with Muddy Waters. He played on all the Chess records, mm-hmm. and he played on Little Walters records, and just a fantastic piano player. And then for Boogie Woogie, Albert Ammons and Pete Johnson, and they were fantastic. And Albert Ammons was from Chicago, but Pete Johnson was Kansas City, and you can hear Pete Johnson on some great records out of Kansas City backing up Big Joe Turner. And then you can also hear Albert Ammons did some solo stuff, which is fantastic. And then the two of them had an act where they played together, and they were the flavor du jour for a few years, and started a craze in the late 30s and early 40s that went on through World War II, and then it ended up becoming rhythm and blues, and then later on rock and roll. So
yeah,
that was, you know, and you know, there was Boogie Woogie at least as far back as the 1920s. This guy Pine Top Smith recorded in the late 20s in Chicago. He had Pine Top's Boogie Woogie, and then that later became orchestrated for Tommy Dorsey's orchestra, and was a hit back like in 1939. That was like 10 years after Pine Top recorded it.
Yeah, and it's so cool to look at the 20s and 30s, and especially with piano, the regional styles that were going on. You know, New Orleans with the ragtime crossing over into stride, and then the Harlem scene of people like Fats Waller. and really doing their Willie the Lion Smith and things like that, doing these very intense stride patterns, and then the barrel house scene in the middle of the country. So what was going on the West Coast then, was it?
Well, on the West Coast, there was a migration along in the early 20s of New Orleans musicians to Los Angeles. And Jelly Roll Morton spent some time in LA in the 20s. And he actually came back to LA to die, like in 1940, 41. And, but there was Jelly Roll Morton, and then there were some other New Orleans musicians out there that he played with. And I think that that famous trombone player, I'm sorry, I'm having a senior moment right now, who recorded with Kid Ory. Kid Ory.
Oh, Kid Ory, sure, yeah.
He was out in LA. And so there was some people out there, and then there are people like Lionel Hampton, who migrated to LA from Chicago, and Lionel lived in LA from the late 20s, and was playing in groups, and you can see a really early film clip of him in a movie called Hallelujah. And it's an early sound film of this guy, King Vidor, V-I-D-O-R. And it's a fantastic nightclub scene, and they have a tracking shot where the camera comes into the nightclub, and on either side of the camera, you see people at tables smoking and drinking and hanging out. And then when you get to the back of the room, there's a band back there playing, and Lionel Hampton is the drummer, and he's wearing a derby hat, and he's doing all these tricks, and he throws his sticks up in the air and catches them, and he's doing all this cool stuff. And it's really a great.
I'm gonna have to find that clip and post a link to it down below so people can watch that. I actually really love the old movie scenes feature. Slim and Slam had some as well.
Right.
And because it was, there's not video from clubs back then. It just didn't really exist. So for us to see it in the setup sort of matter, but it's at least a little insight into how things were back then. Because other than that, we just have text documentation. Jelly Roll's autobiography, the one written with Alan Lomax from the Library of Congress tapes, gives you paints a pretty good picture of what the scene was like back then, but being able to see it on film. And I love seeing the entertainment value and the showmanship of those.
Right.
You would see it was going up through the big bands with Buddy Rich and Krupa as well, with the putting on that real show even from behind a drum kit like Lionel Hampton was doing. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
I think that Krupa was one of the first people to really be able to present himself as a personality, although you can definitely say that Lionel Hampton was doing that in this movie back in 1929, so it wasn't unheard of, but it was more rare, for a drummer. But, you made that point about earlier on in our conversation about groups like the Mills Brothers, putting the entertainment value into their performing. And I just wanted to comment on that, saying that it's really kind of personality based. So like if you compare the different groups, the Boswell sisters were always around a piano, and Connie was always sitting, because she had polio, so she wasn't able to stand. And so they always positioned themselves a certain way to kind of, conceal that fact, and then the Rhythm Boys were fairly animated, and they were they had this guy who was just an over-the-top kind of a manic, spark plug, Harry Barris. And I don't know if Harry actually did the arranging of the vocal harmony. He may have, because he was a composer, and he wrote Wrap Your Troubles in Dreams, and he wrote Mississippi Mud, and he wrote when the bluebirds and the blackbirds get together, let's see, Rapture, Troubles, and Dreams. He wrote a number of tunes, you know, and so they were more animated. Then the Mills Brothers, you know, had a couple of different lead singers, and they had the one guy who did the trumpet imitation, you know, whoop, whoop, you know, that kind of thing. And that was like a real personality moment. The Ink Spots, you know, they had the romantic tenor, and then they had the bass singer deliver the recitative, you know, where he would speak the lyrics.
Yeah.
I mean, and so each one of them, you know, had a great personality. And
yeah, well, both the Mills Brothers and the Ink Spots especially, you know, from the first two notes of the tune exactly who it is. There's no, especially, well, the Ink Spots, I mean, the intro, that they would always have.
Right.
And the hallmarks of their performances were just so indicative of the performers themselves that you'd never question who was playing that too. I love that.
Right, and you don't have to be a musician to be able to pick that out either. You can just be a civilian, you know, and go, oh yeah, look, that sounds like the Ink Spots, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Since gigs don't exist anymore, but you've been doing a little happy hour show from your house.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Time now. I think it's wonderful. People are able to watch you from afar. There's, you know, I always try to find some positives in these weird times that we're living in. And one of the things is we get to see these phenomenal performers just in their living rooms. So if you talk, I guess, more about how have you adapted to performing for a camera versus performing for an audience? Because I feel it's a very different thing, but still being able to bring the external audience into you.
Well, I like playing the ukulele and having an iPad or a laptop as a monitor, because I can really tailor my performance as it goes, you know. And I'm a big ham, you know, so I like to make facial expressions and stuff like that. And I've been studying, you know, the greats for a long time, you know, in music and then also in comedy and in movies. And I'm a big fan of old movies. So, you know, I can take all my favorite, you know, expressions from Fats Waller and from all these different people, you know, and insert them into a performance, you know, and so that is a great thing. When I play the piano, it's a big problem for me because my inclination is to want to address the camera, but I never learned how to play piano well enough to where I could look away from my hands.
Yeah.
So I have to look at my hands, and you know, and I have this conflict going on. So that's kind of a problem for me. But you know, I do enjoy performing online. You know, when I can use the ukulele, when I can do it with that, and I'm kind of looking forward to doing some recording with a cappella. Because
it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Have you done that?
Yeah, I have. It's been a nice thing. I've collaborated with quite a few musicians across the world through that app, which you can do the same thing in video editing programs, but it's so much easier. Just it's click a button and go. But yeah, one of the cool things, you could do some really fun vocal harmony arranging in there, build up, you know, 10 voices or so if you want.
Yeah. Have you tried mixing that down? Like, in other words, you have like a total of 9 channels available or something.
Yeah.
Have you tried mixing down like 2 or 3 channels to one? Or
to do sub mixes and then go? I don't think you can do sub mixes and then go on top. And the thing is, like, the quality is what it is, for lack of a better term. It certainly degrades as you throw more tracks on there. But I think it gets the point across. You know, and that's I think you could still shine through as a performer on there, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm used to listening to old records, so you know, sound quality off, you know, doesn't really bother me unless feeding back or something like that, or unless it's like a really bad mixing problem or something.
Right. Yeah, I have an engineer here in town that does mastering on some of my records for me, and we just slam it to tape before we take it out of the box, slam it to tape. So it doesn't quite sound like the old records, but you get that natural compression and all of that stuff. And the digital forms kind of give you that as they degrade as well. You get some of that natural compression and saturation in there, which is fun.
Right. Well, I did one gig in Philadelphia at the university. I did a swing dance about 19 years ago.
Oh, over at UPenn?
Yeah. And that was fun. But where were you playing before COVID hit, before the lockdown?
Yeah. Well, actually, coincidentally, I did a swing dance at UPenn not that long ago before this. They say there's actually a very active swing dance community in Philadelphia right now. We were bummed that the major dance of the year had to be canceled. It was supposed to be at the end of May. And we were one of the late night bands because we like to play all the fast Django tunes as well. And they were whining that there weren't enough up-tempo tunes to keep people awake. So we're like, if you want 260, we'll do it. It'll be fun. I don't do a whole lot of club work around Philadelphia. I do a fair amount of touring. So I do my steady gigs are mostly hotel bars and lobbies in town. We do the Rittenhouse is one of my main steady ones that I play with a few different groups. But we had a pretty thriving scene going for a while and a really great jazz community here, which is nice, especially leaning back towards the swing era and all of that. Mostly, and I think a lot of that's because of the nice swing dance scene that we have in this city. So I'm really anxiously awaiting for the dances to come back, because that's where I feel the music really shines, when you're playing for this purpose. It's never just for yourself. It's never just for the audience. Everyone's a part of it. And one of my favorite things with doing dances is when you get to that point where the groove locks in and suddenly the dancer's feet are just part of the rhythm section. Right. And everyone stops thinking for a minute. It's just there. And that's true magic. To me.
Yeah. When you were saying that, you reminded me of an experience I had in the late 90s, during the 90s swing scare, with a so-called, I don't know what they called it, the
revival groups.
Revival.
Yep.
Anyway, I would work regularly at an old dance hall in Portland, Oregon, called the Crystal Ballroom. And the Crystal Ballroom was built around 1910 or 1912, and it held several hundred people, maybe not 1,000, but maybe 800 people, something like that. And on the big nights, there was a couple occasions where we had over 700 people there, and we were in a corner facing out, and we'd be doing an up-tempo swing tune. And I could see, and oh, by the way, the other thing, they had a spring-loaded dance floor, so people kind of got this bounce, to their dancing, that was encouraged by the springs on the floor. So they'd be going, like this, right? And we'd be playing, and you could see them going like that. And so I started playing to what I was looking at, They were dancing to what we were doing, and I was playing to what I was seeing, that feel, And we got this really great circular kind of a rhythmic feel going, And it was really that was one of my favorite, dance experiences, playing for dancing.
Yeah, that feeling when it all locks in with the dancers, and you realize that you're all part of the music. You're not playing for them. Y'all are playing together. And it's just such a great feeling. Casey, would you mind just playing us one more tune?
Be my pleasure. I think I'll do this one on the piano.
I got a call other day, a dear old friend of mine sad and getting mad 'cause the sun won't shine. The blues we feel can't repeal. You know that it's a crime, and until that day they go away, gonna be a long, long time. I mean, it's gonna be a long, long time. I got a call other day, dear old friend of mine was feeling sad and getting mad 'cause the sun won't shine. The blues we feel can't repeal. You know that it's a crime. Yes, until that day they go away, it's gonna be a long, long time. I mean, it's gonna be a long, long time. I said, it's gonna be a long, long time.
All right, Casey, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me. For everyone listening, I'm going to be linking to all of Casey's websites and social media and his online gigs that he has coming up, so everyone can hear you. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Been great chatting with you, and I love the stories. If you wouldn't mind, could you just play us a little tune out?
Can do.